It is the responsibility of each employee to be aware and understand the potential vectors which can transfer a disease to the poultry flock. There are several ways that we can further direct and limit traffic within the farm's perimeter. Once employees, service personnel, or visitors have been granted access within the perimeter of the farm, a second layer of defense can be established by designating restricted access zones. An example of a restricted access zone would be a barn which houses live birds. Installing barn doors that can be securely locked helps to discourage unauthorized visitors from entering the poultry barns. This is an example of a barn entrance or a transition zone where a person must cross a physical boundary to gain access to the birds. Having a physical boundary separating the interior and exterior of the barn helps people remember and follow the required standard operating procedures for entering the barn. Let's take a closer look at how to transition from the exterior to the interior of the barn. When crossing a transition zone with a bench, sit on the bench and remove your outside footwear. It is also acceptable to have protective overshoes. While rotating over the bench, at no point should your feet touch the ground. On the barn side of the barrier, a clean pair of barn-specific footwear should be put on and then sanitized in a disinfectant solution. It is important that there is adequate contact time between the boots and the disinfectant to achieve proper sanitation. Prior to entering the barn, an individual should wash or sanitize their hands. Contaminated hands are a potential means of transmitting infectious material from one part of the farm to another. When working on an operation that has multiple ages of flocks, it is advised that the chores are completed in the barn housing the youngest birds first. Young birds typically have a poorer immunity than older birds. After completing the work in the barn, organic matter which has adhered to the bottom of the boot should be scraped off. In the entrance room, boot washing facilities should be utilized, followed by a thorough disinfection of the boots prior to returning them to the shelf. Boots or shoes worn within the barn need to be thoroughly disinfected because the soles of footwear are an excellent site for pathogens to multiply. Since few disinfectants work in the presence of organic matter, the solution must be changed regularly, particularly if it appears dirty. A dirty boot dip should be changed immediately, as it can be a source of pathogens rather than a disinfectant for footwear. Before leaving the barn, an employee's hands should be sanitized to prevent contamination of doorknobs. Most poultry producers practice all-in, all-out production. This is where birds arrive on a single day, and after production, all the birds are shipped out on the same day. After the birds have been removed from the barn, the manure and litter which has accumulated during the production cycle must be removed from the barn. The manure should be removed as soon as possible because flies and other pests can rapidly multiply and become a nuisance. Manure is taken out of the barn and dumped into a manure wagon which is ideally located on the other side of the perimeter fence. This manure can be taken off-site for composting well away from the poultry facilities or spread directly on the land. After removing the majority of the organic matter, it is important to sweep down the barn and remove dust prior to washing. Proper disinfection of a barn is only possible if meticulous removal of organic matter is done first. Small amounts of organic matter will prevent disinfectants from properly sanitizing a surface. After cleaning out the organic matter from the entire barn, all equipment, such as feeders and drinkers, should be washed down with warm or hot water and detergent. The barn should then be rinsed to remove the detergent, which can sometimes interfere with proper disinfectant application. Finally, the barn must be sanitized with a solution of water and disinfectant which can be mixed together at appropriate concentration to achieve an acceptable level of sanitation. Following disinfection, the barn should have adequate downtime, which means the barn sits empty before any birds are placed. Typically having a downtime of 10 days or longer is advisable to help break disease cycles and get a good handle on pest populations within the barn. Prior to the arrival of new birds, fresh litter materials such as pine shavings or straw should be placed in the barn and warmed prior to the chicks arriving. It is important that the litter material is of high quality, and the place where the litter has been stored is free of pests.